Welcome to Battleground, where we focus on voters in our 7 swing states that will be casting their ballots in November, because they're the voters who will ultimately decide this election. Donald Trump looks to regain his mojo this week with key campaign stops in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. We'll get the latest on a busy week for the Trump-Vance ticket. Then Native American voters in Arizona. Democrats have upped their outreach efforts in the state, with Native Americans making up a significant voting bloc, enough to swing a close election in November. Plus, TMZ's Harvey Levin on what Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s endorsement of Donald Trump could mean for some of our swing states. I'm Cupp, and with fewer than 70 days until the election, this is Battleground. With both conventions behind us and a scheduled debate ahead, the next 2 weeks mark a significant moment for the Trump campaign as they try to reverse Kamala Harris's momentum and reset this race. For his part, the former president was at Arlington National Cemetery yesterday, honoring 13 U.S. service members killed 3 years ago in an airport attack in Afghanistan, and slamming the Biden-Harris administration for the deadly withdrawal. Later this week, the former president heads to Wisconsin and Pennsylvania as he keeps his eye and travel schedule on the swing state prize. For more on all of this, I'm pleased to be joined by a journalist who covers Donald Trump on a daily basis, Meridith McGraw from Politico. Meredith, good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's start with the debate, which is supposed to be right here in Philadelphia on September 10th. What are you hearing from the Trump campaign about whether or not he's actually going to pull out of it?
Oh, I think Donald Trump is absolutely going to be there, and his aides have indicated the same. You know, there's a great debate about the debates going on at the moment, and it all comes down to the rules, whether or not the mics are going to be on or off while they're going back and forth. And you have to think about how having an open mic might play to both of their strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
Obviously, if Trump is speaking over Harris, that's not a great look. But Harris could also be able to not have Trump, yelling over her as she's speaking.
Yeah, we'll have to see how it all shakes out. On Thursday, the former president will be in Wisconsin, then back here in Pennsylvania on Friday. And this follows a week of other swing state visits. Any indication of where the Trump campaign believes he really needs to spend more time?
I think you just have to look at some of the schedules that both Trump and J.D. Vance have had over the past week. They're still spending a lot of time in these battleground states, but they have gone to other places like North Carolina and Georgia. And you're going to see, I think, more of Trump in North Carolina and Pennsylvania. Some of the early voting is going to be starting soon. Mm-hmm. And he will also be heading to Minnesota. And for Vance, the big focus for the Trump campaign is going to be on him being in those so-called blue wall states.
Yeah.
And Pennsylvania, I can't emphasize how important that state is going to be, and how Vance in particular is going to be spending a lot of time there, and in Michigan as well.
As a follow-up to that, Meredith, many Trump supporters were worried about some of the recent distractions, like that rift with Georgia Governor Brian Kemp and who the better-looking candidate is in the race, which actually happened. But Donald Trump has been more focused over the past couple of days, it seems like. Are you getting that as well?
Well, we were hearing from aides and allies on TV and op-eds all over that they really wanted Trump to be focusing more on policy and putting the personal attacks aside. And last week during the DNC, the Trump campaign had him on all cylinders in different states every day, focusing on different policy issues. He would talk about crime or immigration, and then, of course, he would veer off and talk about whatever he wanted to. And at times that is just a distraction, and it leads to other headlines. I was with him in Bedminster, where he had a press conference that was supposed to be about the economy, but one of the biggest headlines that came out of it was about new staffers coming on board his campaign, and his pledge to keep going after Kamala Harris. He's 78 years old. I can't imagine that a lot's going to change.
Okay, yesterday, the Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled against Democrats who wanted Green Party candidate Jill Stein taken off the ballot. This seems to me like good news for Trump, right?
You would think so. And, the Democrats, they came out and they said that they were disappointed with this decision. But look, in a state like Wisconsin, where the race could really come down to just a few thousand votes, everything counts, everything matters. And so for the Democrats in particular, where Jill Stein's support could eat up into theirs, it was, I'm sure, a big disappointment for them.
And finally, Meredith, Trump went out of his way in a couple of recent campaign stops to praise his running mate, J.D. Vance. Do Republicans in places like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, do they feel like Vance is helping them with their chances?
Well, Vance was picked by the Trump campaign in part because they wanted him to focus on those 3 states in particular. And they really felt like his biography would lend to him gaining support there. He could talk about his own background and really relate to voters on the ground. And we've seen how some of the Democrats' attack lines against Vance were effective at the get-go. His favorability numbers have gone up with Republicans as he's gone out there more on the trail, and they've really pushed him to do a lot of interviews. You've seen him on the Sunday shows and doing local media interviews as well. But it's yet to be seen how much of an impact Vance is going to have in those states going forward.
Meridith McGraw from Politico, thanks so much for your insight and your reporting.
Thanks for having me.
Up next, how Native American voters could play a significant role for the outcome in Arizona this year. But first, here are some swing state voters on why they're supporting Donald Trump. Battleground will be right back.
Donald Trump did a good job leading the country in his first term. He did it for 4 years. I mean, there's experience counts.
Who cares what he tweets?
We're the ones that are taking all this this rhetoric that's being thrown around and allowing ourselves to be divided over it.
He's a businessman, and at the end of the day, America's a business. So I feel like under him, we're in good hands.
Here with us today, I know we have a number of Native leaders. And as president, I will tell you, I will always honor tribal sovereignty and respect tribal self-determination. Future where every Native person can realize their aspirations and every Native community is a place of opportunity.
Welcome back to Battleground. Kamala Harris in Arizona appealing to Native American voters there, and with good reason. In 2020, more than 60,000 Native Americans cast a vote in Arizona, a state Joe Biden won by fewer than 11,000 votes. And among our 7 swing states, Arizona has the largest Native American population. With the state shaping up to be another very close call this year, their vote will be crucial. For more, I'm joined by Debra Utacia Krol, Indigenous Affairs reporter with the Arizona Republic. Debra, good to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me, SE. It's an honor to be here.
So we know both parties, both campaigns very much want to have Native American voters in Arizona on board, given the numbers we just laid out. In past elections, how is the Native American vote split between the two parties?
In Arizona, it's been anywhere between 70 and 80% Democrat. Generally in Arizona, the tribes perceive that Democrats have their interests at heart more than Republicans do.
And in 2020, Biden won Arizona with the help of specifically Navajo voters. Can Kamala Harris expect the same constituency to back her?
If she holds to some of the Biden administration policies, like increasing funding for education, for broadband internet, which tribes are greatly lacking, things that can get tribal economies built up and sustainable, I do believe they will go for her.
And I'm sure that's why she's talking a lot about it. I want to move to another state for a minute. Donald Trump won Robeson County, North Carolina in 2016 and 2020. That's significant because it's home to the largest Native American tribe east of the Mississippi, the Lumbee. They'd long voted for Democrats. Do you think Trump can win Native American voters in Arizona?
If he can make the case that he will support tribes' efforts to become self-sufficient, self-sustaining, to build economies, to bolster their capability of building a business, to have better educational outcomes, increase health care, and generally honor the federal government's trust responsibilities to tribes.
So they're gettable. You're saying that even though 70-80% of the time they vote for Democrats, they're gettable for Republicans.
I would say that I'm not sure if Trump can get them, but
that's a good distinction. Right. Okay.
But there are like congressional races where there are Republican congressmen who have worked with tribes, who continue to support tribes, and they tend to get reelected.
Okay, and Debra, what have been some of the obstacles in getting Native American voters registered there?
It's been a really hard road ever since Native people were given U.S. citizenship in 1924. It took 24 years in Arizona for American Indians' right to vote to be affirmed through an Arizona Supreme Court decision. Another 25 years before things like the Voting Rights Act and various amendments actually made it easier for Native people to be registered. The requirement for birth certificates or other proof of citizenship was a really big barrier for older Native people who were born at home and didn't have birth certificates. The state has somewhat made it easier in that you can now present your tribal enrollment card, a document the BIA gives you known as a certificate of degree of Indian blood or certificate of Indian blood, the Indian Health Service certifications. It still can be a hassle. There's one tribe where in order to get registered, you have to make a 250-mile round trip around the Grand Canyon to Kingman and back. So these things are still, there's still a lot of barriers in place.
Debra Utacia Krol with the Arizona Republic. Thanks so much for breaking all of that down with us.
Well, thanks for having me.
For more on all of this, visit us at battlegroundnews.com or click on the QR code right here. You can sign up for our newsletter, download our interactive swing state map, and find our social media links. And if you miss an episode, that's okay. You can catch up on YouTube or through our podcast. Up next, TMZ founder Harvey Levin on what RFK Jr.'s exit and endorsement in this race means for voters in our swing states. Battleground will be right back.
There are some obvious people here who might run, and that would be Gavin Newsom, Raphael Warnock, Gretchen Whitmer, Wes Moore. Are any of those candidates palatable enough for you that you would throw your support behind them and not run? Or are you in it for the long haul?
I would make the same deal with them that I offered to President Biden is let's run a poll and see if they're more likely to beat President Trump than me, and I will withdraw in October.
Welcome back to Battleground. Harvey Levin is the founder, executive producer, and host of TMZ and TMZ Live, where politics and pop culture often meet, including his many conversations with RFK Jr. during this campaign. Harvey, it's great to see you. Welcome to Battleground.
It is my pleasure, Essie. I'm a big fan of yours.
Oh, well, thanks. We're a fan of yours as well. So I want to start with RFK Jr. because during this campaign, I think you've talked to him more than anyone else in media. And we just played that exchange you had with him while he was still a candidate in this race. To your read, why did he drop out?
Well, I mean, I think that he knew that he was more a spoiler than a candidate who could win. You know, at a point, and especially when you had the big change in the Democratic Party from Biden to Harris, and he lost a lot of that support. I think it kind of marginalized him to a point where there was just no real path. But at the same time, the number of votes that he can move one way or the other in a close race could really matter. And I think he probably just calculated that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know it's going to be close. And in some of our swing states, take Nevada, for example, Robert Kennedy, he still has some real traction. He had a lot of fans. Do you think that his endorsement of Donald Trump could help in places like Nevada or other swing states?
You know, a lot of the support he has are from people who are disaffected, who are not necessarily likely to vote. So even though he has support, the question is how motivated are these people to go to the polls, and how many people does it take to make a difference? And I don't know the number. You know, I do want to make a comment, though. You mentioned that we've had him on more than most. I think we've had him on twice. And that is more than most.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real issue. Why wasn't he on CNN? I think he may have been on once. He says he was on a grand total of 4 times on cable. How can that be? Look at what happened with Ross Perot. He was on every day. And Kennedy was polling at a point at 20%, and he wasn't on. And I think, you know, a lot of people believe he wasn't on because he didn't fit the mold of what the various networks were pushing. And I think that's a real problem for democracy. And that has nothing to do, I'm not saying I support him because we're not supporting anybody.
Yeah.
But this has nothing to do with support. It has to do with free flow of information. And the fact that somebody polling that way didn't have a platform on networks, I think is a real problem for media.
Yeah, and you don't have to even go back as far as Ross Perot. Jill Stein was a spoiler, and she could be again. She's still on the ballot in Wisconsin. RFK has numbers that could definitely move some of these voters in swing states. So I think you're absolutely right. They're all worth covering if these people can impact an election. Okay, this is the question, though, I've been dying to ask you. In your interview with RFK Jr. and his wife, Cheryl Hines, the actress, she sort of joked that if he went into the Trump administration, she would leave him. And breaking news here, just today, Trump announced that RFK Jr. will lead his transition team. Now, since that technically isn't part of the administration, is that the loophole that Cheryl Hines would need to stay with him?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not privy to what goes on between the two of them. I think, look, I have no idea how much she was joking. My gut tells me she is not a Trump supporter.
Right.
At the same time, you look at what somebody like Bradley Whitfield said, where he was, attacked her.
Yes.
And said, "How dare you?"
He called her husband a lunatic.
RFK Jr. is fair game. Yeah. People hurl all sorts of insults at candidates, but to go after a candidate's wife and to say that how dare you in the name of women's rights? Well, he's bullying a woman in saying this. That's what this has come to. It was never this way before.
Well, and on TMZ and TMZ Live, you guys have been talking politics for years, and I know you're really into it. Why is it important for you to bring politics into pop culture for your audiences?
We're a pop culture brand.
Yeah.
We're not a celebrity brand. We've always been a pop culture brand. It's why very early on we created a sports vertical and a sports television show. We cover hip hop. We cover pop culture.
Right.
Politics is part of pop culture. I'll tell you something I haven't really ever talked about, Essie. Early on, we were going to start TMZ DC.
Oh, my.
When we were with Warner Brothers and AOL. And AOL killed it in the middle. We were actually about to hire people, and they got nervous, and they thought, oh, we don't want to do this because, what if there are regulations that people, draconian regulations as a result of breaking stories. And a couple years later, Warner Brothers came back to me and said, you know what? That was a mistake. AOL got nervous. We'll do it. And you know what? I went to DC a bunch of times. We actually hired a staff. And the day before we were supposed to start, they pulled the plug again. So yes,
Wow.
I wanted to do DC in a big way, and we do it. We're just not doing it, frankly, the way I wanted to.
I would have watched that show, I can tell you, because the intersection of politics and pop culture is where I live as well. Harvey, stay right there. I want to ask you a little bit more about Donald Trump. Battleground, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Battleground with TMZ founder Harvey Levin. Harvey, you've known Donald Trump a long time, and he is almost always underpolled in these elections. What do you think his appeal is with voters? Has it waned at all since 2016 and 2020, or do you think we're still underpolling and he's still really got a hold on a lot of voters?
Well, he does have a hold on a lot of voters. We know that from the polls. And it seems like there is a group, it kind of reminds me of Richard Nixon, that when Nixon was going through everything he went through before he resigned, he did have a large group that just would not budge. And eventually they did. But Donald Trump seems to have that group. Whether that group is big enough to push him over the line, I don't know. I just don't know.
All we know is it's going to be tight. No matter what, this race is going to be tight, right?
Yeah, I mean, 44,000 votes made the difference last time around.
That's right.
And, the way I see it is the large majority of people in this country are entrenched, and nothing is going to make them change. The only caveat to that is that I do think in this last debate, when a lot of Democrats saw Joe Biden, they did change some. So I think that this debate coming up may well be the only thing that has an impact if one side or the other goes off the rails.
Yeah.
'Cause if it doesn't, we're talking about a small group that both sides are going to be playing to. And when I say a small group in each state. You've got to go wide, but you're really focusing on what, 100,000 people.
Oh yeah, that's why we exist here at Battleground. We are covering those very voters in those swing states that are going to decide the election. Yeah. Harvey Levin from TMZ, I loved this. I hope we can do it again.
Yeah, no, this was really fun. Really nice talking to you.
You too, thanks. All right, that's it for now. I'm Cupp. See you next time here on Battleground.